Because he had been drinking, Arnold Bragg considered it a stroke of good fortune that the accident happened a long way from any main road and the chance of a patrolling police car. He had no exact idea of his location, just that it was somewhere in the West Country. He was on his way back from Cornwall, where he had been covering a story, an expose of a witch's coven, for the Sunday Herald. He drove an milligram sports car and, as always with a few drinks inside him, drove too fast. With time to spare, he had left the A30 at a whim. It was a summer evening, slowly cooling after the heat of the day. The countryside was what he called pretty, with lanes twisting between hedgerows. He took a corner at speed and rammed the trunk of a tree that jutted into the road around the bend. Despite being shaken from the crash, Bragg continued driving until he found a small garage next to a pub, miles from a proper village. A mechanic agreed to fix the leaking radiator but indicated it would take a couple of hours, leading Bragg to wait at the neighboring pub. It was the kind of pub that exists only in out-of-the-way places, and then rarely, a house of local stone with a front room converted as a bar. The door stood open and he walked in past a stack of beer crates. The walls were thick and it was cool inside. On a polished counter rested 2 casks, one of cider and one of beer. A grey-haired woman sat knitting behind the counter, and 2 oldish men sat on a wooden bench by the window. "I'll try a pint of your local beer," Bragg said, turning on a charm that rarely failed him. The woman laid her knitting aside, picked up a glass mug and held it under the tap. Sediment hung in the rich brown liquid. Bragg tasted it, then drank deeply. "I didn't know anyone still brewed beer like this," he said, glancing around the room. "Perhaps you gentlemen will join me." "Ah, likely we will, sir. And many thanks," one of the men answered. Bragg's gaze moved on to a poster thumbtacked to the wall. It had obviously been hand-printed, and read, "Circus. Before your very eyes, werewolf into man. See the vampire rise from his coffin. Bring the children. Invest in a sense of wonder." As Arnold Bragg stared and wondered if beer had finally rotted his brain, sluggish memory stirred. In his job, he always listened to rumors. Some he hunted down and obtained a story. There had been this crazy one, crazy but persistent, of a freak circus that never visited towns but stopped only for one night at isolated villages. He had come across it first in the fens, then on the Yorkshire moors, and again in a Welsh valley. Bragg, focused on exposing frauds, immediately sobered up upon realizing the circus's presence, leaving his beer unfinished. The cryptic and labeled poster for the show, which moved between remote locations, presented a promising lead for his investigation. Arnold Bragg strolled outside, past the garage where the mechanic worked on his car, and sauntered towards the cottages. A few families, young husbands and wives with their offspring, were walking down a lane, and he followed them. Presently he glimpsed, in the distance, the canvas top of a large tent showing above some trees. He kept to himself, observing the people on the way to the circus. They went with measured step, people who took their pleasure seriously. With them, there was no gaiety. Beyond a screen of trees was a green field with the big top and a huddle of caravans and Land Rovers. A small queue stood at an flap of the tent, where a wizened little old man sold tickets. He sported a fringe of white hair, nut-brown skin, and the appearance of a chimpanzee. Bragg dipped a hand into his pocket and brought out some loose change. "I don't believe you'll like our show, sir," the old man said with a foreign accent. "It's purely for the locals, you understand. Nothing sophisticated for a London gentleman." "You're wrong," Bragg said, urging money on him. "This is just right for me." He snatched a ticket and walked into the tent. Seats rose in tiers, wooden planks set on angle irons. In the center was a sawdust ring behind low planking. An aisle at the rear allowed performers to come and go. Bragg found an empty seat away from the local people, high enough to command a clear view. Not many seats were occupied. He lit a cigarette and watched the crowd. Grave faces, little talk. The children showed none of that excitement normally associated with a visit to the circus. The old man who sold tickets doubled as ringmaster. He shuffled across the sawdust and made his announcement in a whisper. "I, Dr. Nis, welcome you to my circus. Tonight you will see true wonders. The natural world is full of prodigies for those who open their eyes and minds. We begin with the vampire. Somewhere, pipe music played on a non-Western scale, effecting an eerie chant. Two laborers came down the aisle, carrying a worn coffin. The bagpipes shrilled. The lid of the coffin moved upwards, jerkily, an inch at a time. A thin hand with long fingernails appeared from inside. The lid was pushed open, and the vampire rose and stepped onto the sawdust. Its face had the pallor of death, and canine teeth showed long and pointed. A ragged cloak swirled about its human form. The laborers returned with a young lamb and tossed it to the vampire. Hungrily, teeth bit deep, and the lips sucked to the lamb's throat. When the drained carcass was tossed aside, the vampire appeared swollen as a well-filled leech. "You who are present tonight are especially fortunate," Dr. Nis whispered. "Not at every performance is it possible to show a shape-changer. Lycanthropy is not a condition that can be perfectly tamed. And now, here is the werewolf." He blew an ultrasound whistle. A large grey wolf trotted into the sawdust ring, slanting eyes glinting yellowish green. The animal threw back its head and gave a prolonged, chilling howl. Hairs prickled on the back of Bragg's neck. He blinked his eyes as the wolf shape wavered and elongated, rising high on its hind limbs. The fur disappeared until a naked man stood before them. An attendant draped a blanket about his shoulders and they walked off. Blood pounded through Bragg's head. It had to be a fake, but it was a convincing fake. "The ancient Egyptians believed in physical immortality," Dr. Nis whispered. "Here now, a mummy from the land of the pharaohs." A withered mummy, wrapped in discolored linen bandages, was carried into the ring. A voice spoke, seeming to come from the mummy in an unfamiliar language. Dr. Nis translated freely. "The mummy speaks. True believers only are safe here. Those who doubt are advised to open their hearts." Bragg wanted to laugh, but sweat dried cold on his flesh. "We have next," Dr. Nis said with pride, "an experiment of my own. Can a corpse be reanimated?" A travesty of a man shuffled into the ring. The limbs were not identical. They had not come from the same body. The waxen head lolled at an angle. It lumbered unsteadily around the sawdust ring, rocking from side to side, and lost its head. A small gasp was jerked from Bragg's lips as the detached head hit the sawdust and rolled to a stop. The headless cadaver blundered on aimlessly until attendants hurried to guide it from the ring. Bragg felt sick. Impossible to believe the thing was just a freak. Yet he had to believe, or admit the impossible. Dr. Nis looked unhappy. "I must apologize. Obviously this experiment is not yet perfected for public viewing. And so we come to our final offering this evening. Science maintains that reptiles died out before men appeared, but science has been wrong before. There was some interbreeding." The creature that slithered into the ring was about 5 feet long. It had the general appearance of a man on all fours, but its skin was scaly and iridescent. The hands were clawed, the head narrowed and thrust forward, and a forked tongue hung from the mouth. An attendant brought a plastic bag and released a cloud of flies. The creature reared up, its long tongue flickering like lightning, catching the flies and swallowing them. A sick show, Bragg decided. An outrage to perform this sort of thing before children. The catchphrases of popular journalism ran through his head. This show must be banned. Pipe music played again, a falling scale. Dr. Nis bowed, and the creature left the ring. Families rose and filed quietly out, their offspring subdued. Bragg vaulted into the ring, crossed the sawdust and left by the aisle exit. As he hurried towards the caravans, he saw Dr. Nis entering one of them. The door was just closing when Bragg arrived and leaned on it. Dr. Nis turned to peer at him. "Ah, Mr. Bragg, I was half expecting you. You are, after all, well known in your trade." Bragg pushed his way into the caravan. Everything seemed smaller, neat and tidy in its appointed place. "Then you'll know the paper I work for and the sort of thing I write," he said, emitting the charm. "Tell me, how do you justify your show? Horror for adults. Okay. But the kids?" Dr. Nis made a small deprecating motion with his hands. "Horror, Mr. Bragg? I deplore the term. My life is spent trying to keep alive a faith in the mystery of nature. Strange things happen. If a man who believes sees a ghost, is he frightened? Yet a man who disbelieves and comes face to face with one may well die of shock. So perhaps my show serves a useful purpose. As for children, what better time to develop a sense of wonder? That's your story. Now let's have the lowdown on how your gimmicks work. Gimmicks. Dr. Nis regarded him calmly. I assure you I do not deal in trickery. Consider this. Who knows you are here? And aren't you just a little bit frightened? Bragg flinched. Who, me? Of a bunch of freaks. But his voice was edged with doubt. Dr. Nis said, I do not want the kind of publicity you have in mind, Mr. Bragg. I don't think it would serve my purpose. He smiled suddenly, and his smile was not for his visitor. Arnold Bragg turned. Freaks crowded the door of the caravan. The vampire, the werewolf, and the lizard man. The resurrected man was conspicuously absent. I think it would be best if Mr. Bragg disappeared, Dr. Nis said quietly. But don't damage his head, please. He looked again at Bragg, his eyes bright and hard. You see, Mr. Bragg, I believe I have a use for it. Thanks for watching. Follow Story Hub Central for more exciting stories.